the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this Thursday. I just want to ask you, did you vote this last election? If where you lived there was an election, do you vote? Do you think it's a big deal? Is it one of those things where you say, yeah, I'm going to vote, but then maybe at the end of a long day, if you didn't early vote, you're like, I'm just going to go have dinner and forget it. I mean, or is it one of those things where, look, since I was a child, my folks taught me this, and it's my right as an American to vote, and people fought for this right, and I'm going to do it no matter what? What's your attitude on voting? Because I'll say this, I think more people these days aren't voting, and it's a little bit disturbing, and I want to know why. And certainly here in Davidson County, we've seen numbers down statewide and nationally to some degree, unless you really have a presidential election. I know it goes up for that, but what about these other ones? They're important too. We're going to get into that this morning with our guests, talking about why Tennessee, and frankly in general, why there's lower voter turnout, and more importantly, what it takes to get it back up there or to get more people to vote. What do you think? Share your thoughts on that. 737-7587. Shanna Hughey is with us this morning. You are with ThinkTennessee.
I am.
And I appreciate you coming on. ThinkTennessee, all right. We like to think in Tennessee. What is ThinkTennessee all about? It's not specifically about getting out voting. It's more about just improving this state civically, right? And
yeah. So ThinkTennessee is a nonpartisan statewide think tank.
Okay.
And you're right. We're not just an organization that's focused on voting. We're focused on moving our state forward in a number of ways. Specifically, we focus on increasing family economic security. So for working families here in Tennessee, making sure that a good day's work can help you support your family.
Livable wage.
Yep. And the other thing that we work on a lot is increasing civic engagement. So what if we had a state where every family was economically secure and every person was civically engaged? That's what we're working toward.
That's wonderful.
Right?
We're quite a ways from that goal, right?
We are. And that's why we're here.
Now, civically engaged, when you say someone being civically engaged, that can mean a lot of things, but really one of the first things that truly comes into my mind, and the easiest way, in my opinion, you can be civically engaged is to vote. That's it. That is pretty simple. I know sometimes there's a line and you have to take some time to make the trip over to the precinct, but that is civic engagement. Boom.
It is
at its purest form, isn't it?
That's right.
You go and vote. And so, there are other forms of it, but why then do you think we don't see more people voting?
Yeah, it's the trickiest question, right? And there's not like this silver bullet where if we just did this one thing, then everybody would show up, right? Because sometimes folks say, well, if we just had more competitive elections, then everybody would show up, right? Except for what we know is, so Tennessee historically is, in recent history, among the lowest voter turnout states in the nation.
Okay.
So when ThinkTennessee
always
launched,
has been, you're saying?
No.
It hasn't. Just in recent.
That's the thing. We have this incredibly rich civic history where 2 decades ago, we were sort of leading the way on this.
Okay.
And reverse, we're getting ready to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Tennessee, essentially giving women the right to
suffrage,
vote, right? So think about, we used to lead. We're the state, the perfect 36. We ratified the 19th Amendment. We gave women the right to vote. Many years later, we're the state of Baker v. Carr, that case from Memphis that established the idea that for one person, one vote, everybody's vote counts equally. Really cool history in our state. Right. And even in the 90s, we were sort of, in the early 2000s, sort of leading the way. And so one of the things we're working on is how do we get us back?
Okay, so you're saying in the 2000s we were leading the way, and voter turnout was solid, and the state has a great legacy. Maybe people recognize that.
That's right.
Okay, so what do you think was the trend that started in mid 2000 or whatever that started pushing us back and we didn't have as much turnout?
Yeah, and I don't know if we were pushed back as much as other states just leapfrogged us.
Oh, okay, maybe they increased.
Right? And so when you think about why is voter turnout low in this state, again, some folks will say, well, we don't have competitive elections, right? But every year Tennessee ranks lower in voter registration and voter turnout than every state that touches us, right? And so Kentucky, Alabama, they're not states traditionally known for extremely competitive elections in the recent past either. And so I think competitiveness maybe is one piece of the puzzle, but even thinking about this 2018 election, we had the most competitive statewide elections that we'll probably see for some time, right? And we ranked, the newest numbers aren't out yet, but initial estimates look like we're going to rank about 44th in the nation for turnout. Before that, we were 49th in turnout, and before that, we were 58th. 30th, and that's all from 2014 to 2018.
When we base the numbers on turnout, are we looking at the turnout based on registered voters, or are we looking at the turnout based on the population of the state?
That's such a good question, and it's nuanced, right?
Yeah,
so
it is, because there can be different reasons for why.
Yeah, so a lot of those numbers are citizen voting age population.
Okay, good.
So that is eligible voters. It's not necessarily registered.
No, and I think that's the important one to look at. Now, that could then raise the question, and there can be a lot of reasons for that, and we'll get into those, and we've got calls coming in. Are there barriers to people registering in Tennessee that other states don't have that make it more difficult for some too? And I know that can be a controversial issue, but there have been things that have been passed, recently especially, that some people think can be barriers and make it more difficult for certain segments of the population to register to vote.
Yeah, I think that's right. So when we're thinking about how do we get in this place, but more importantly, what do we do moving forward, there's a few different pieces of that, right? And one certainly is, how can we modernize our systems to make sure that, one, we're opening, if you are an eligible voter in this state, you're able to cast a ballot. That's really important. When we modernize our systems, we also save taxpayer dollars, we increase government efficiency, and then there's some civic culture stuff too. So you mentioned at the top, Nick, did you go to the polls with your parents, right? And so I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Both of those kids go to.
My son went with me. Now, I don't know. We'll see how it translates now that he's off on his own going to college, and if he remembers and thinks about it. I don't know. They just seem so removed from it.
So we did a poll of folks in the state, and we asked, did you go to the polls with your parents? And if I had to guess the number of people who said, yes, I always voted with my parents, I was going to put that about 2/3 of the state would say, absolutely, I voted with my parents. It was the opposite. So 2/3 of the state said they never went to the polls.
That their parents, for whatever reason, chose not to bring. Yeah, I mean, the parent has to make that decision to take them, right?
Yeah,
and so,
it's during the work day, it's during school, and so sometimes you have to go a little bit out of your way to bring your kids.
To me, it was an important thing. So the parents, it starts with that. I thought, this is a neat thing. Bring him along and explain it to him, show him the process, and maybe it'll carry over when he's old enough that he'll know it's an important thing to do.
Yeah, so there's a piece of civic culture. We saw when we did this poll a lot of confusion around who's eligible to vote. So more than half the state was confused about whether you could vote if you had an unpaid traffic ticket or an unpaid utility bill or you weren't fluent in English. So you can vote. None of those things are barriers to voting.
But maybe they thought there was. You're confused and you figured, why mess with it? So do you think there are dark forces at work that would prefer to see certain segments of the population not vote?
I don't know. I don't know about that as much as
there are various segments of the population that would prefer that only people that think like me vote.
Maybe, but I really, so we've been working with election officials and folks at the state and then folks on the ground getting folks registered to vote for years now. And mostly what I see is people doing a really sacred public service.
Now, redistricting, is that an issue with it, though, sometimes?
Yeah, so redistricting is a big issue, and that again, we're the Baker v. Carr state, right? The state that sort of said the way that you draw your districts, it's got to be fair, it's got to be one person, one vote. And then we saw the Supreme Court sort of start to, at least it started to close the doors to the federal courthouse around cases saying that I don't think this is the way that it's set up. So Tennessee is not right now as gerrymandered as other states. That's great, right? So when we did it in 2011, it doesn't, certainly, every district is not perfect, right? But we're not as gerrymandered as some of the states that you hear about in the news, like North Carolina and Maryland. What makes our state different and what we would really like to see improve is the way that we redistrict, the transparency, the sunlight that comes into that process. And so that's where Tennessee is really an outlier. When we did this in 2011, there was not the sort of public participation that you see in states like Alabama and Louisiana. So now we're looking forward to 2021, and we're hoping that there are at least notices posted about meetings so that the public can attend them. The General Assembly does a really good job. I don't know if you've ever watched legislative hearings online.
Some. I've been there in person to see some of them. Yeah, sure.
And the thing is, if you can't make it there in person, you can watch it from your desk. And if you can't watch it when the hearing's going on, you can watch it later. They do such a good job of making that process open. What would be so great to see, and what I really hope we will see, and I think the public has a right to expect, is the same sort of openness when it comes to the redistricting process. And wouldn't it be cool if we moved some of those meetings outside of Nashville? So we could get into the rural
just take them
communities
to
and
rural
the places.
communities and give them access and a chance to see them.
And a chance
so
to
they don't
weigh
do that.
in.
I didn't even know necessarily that sometimes the meetings are always held here in Nashville because it's the capital. And
or it's even sort of hard to tell because there haven't always been notices about the meetings and it's not stuff posted online.
Look, but the truth is, it's going to take a very unique individual to say, gee, I want to just tune in today online to the Capitol where the lawmakers are talking redistricting. Let's check that out. And then later we can watch American Idol. I mean, I'm just trying to think of really, and I know what you're saying.
No, it's true.
We'll go to the break here, but try to figure out what it takes to grab some, especially some of the younger crowd. How old are your kids? They're still young.
6 and 8.
6 and 8. Okay, they have a way. My son now is old enough to vote, and we'll see if he does on his own without us reminding him. That's what I want to see.
But maybe that's what you're there for.
Well, yeah. Well, I will remind him if he forgets, but I just want to see if maybe say, hey, Dad, today I voted. I don't know. We'll see. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, we've got some calls. 737-7587. Your thought just on the voting process, maybe what you just went through in one of our recent elections. If you have a question or comment about that, or what it takes to get more people out, or what it would take to get you out. We'll be back with our guest and your calls right after this.